Hello and welcome to the Be Formless Flow Driven CEO and VC podcast, where we are reshaping life, leadership, business and investing. And today I am welcoming to the show CiCi Bellis, all the way from California, Bay Area. Welcome to the show, CiCi.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to chat.
Me too. And I love that we've both got the yellow vibes going. When I saw you pre-show, I was like, oh my gosh, you're wearing one of my favorite colors. And my glasses on, and here we are. Snap. So it's always good
Love
when
it.
you. Yeah, me too. I absolutely do as well. And CC, thank you for coming on the show, and a big shout out to all the listeners. I think you are going to get a lot from this conversation because CC is a dynamic woman taking on so much of the world, and it's very exciting and has been doing for quite a while. And I am going to say that most recently, just to start with, that CC has been announced in the 30 under 30 Forbes for 2026. So I wish I could hit the button where it's like clap, 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 I don't know how to do any of that at this point in time. I should learn how to do that. But CC, big congratulations. I mean, you're 27 and I was just saying to you, I'm 48. So 21 years, I'm 21 years older than you. And I love these conversations because it's inspiring to think that someone at your age has already achieved so much. So let's get into it because, like I said, you've had quite the career, and you're the founder and general partner of Cartan Capital, and you established the company back in 2023. You were also, drumroll, a former professional tennis player. And you know what it means to perform at the highest level and what it takes to reinvent yourself when one chapter comes to an end. And it's really interesting that at 27, you already know that. So you reached a career high ranking of Women Tennis Association, I was about to say Australia, Association of number 35 as a professional tennis player. And you stepped away from the sport into an entirely different arena, and that is venture capital. What followed was a shapeshift from athlete to investor, carrying the discipline, the resilience, and the long-term thinking that defined your sporting career into innovation and company building. And so as founder and general partner at Cartan Capital, you invest in sports and health technology companies focused on improving how people move, recover, perform, and live healthier lives. And in an industry which is, I'm having a lot of conversations around this, and where women remain underrepresented as fund managers and capital allocators, CC, you're helping shape the next generation of venture through a lens informed by elite performance and lived experience. So good. At the heart of your journey is an ongoing exploration of transformation. How we navigate identity beyond achievement, and what becomes possible when the skills that shaped one chapter are consciously carried into the next. And I think I pretty much summarized when you booked in for the pod and I asked you what's one unique insight or lived experience when it comes to reshaping life, leadership, business and investing, because you said as a former athlete, professional athlete turned venture capitalist, you've worked to reshape the founders, investors and institutions thinking about human performance by bridging sports, health and technology to back companies and improve how people move, recover, perform and live healthier lives. I'm going to hand it over to you. 27, I'm just going to remind the audience again, anything is possible. And CC's already had one career and she's got another career now, which is incredible. So you had a career as a professional tennis player, and now you're a owner of a company in VC. Tell us a little bit about the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the intro. That's great. Yeah, so I grew up playing really competitive junior tennis. I actually ended up committing to play at Stanford originally. That was kind of a big goal of mine growing up. And about a year before I was supposed to go to Stanford, I ended up turning pro. And I kind of had a ranking goal in mind. When you're a really good junior tennis player, a lot of those young players turn pro and kind of forego college at that point. So kind of hit, the ranking goal that I had and turned pro. And actually that same year, the WTA partnered with Indiana University. So completed my degree online while I was playing full time, which was exciting. And yeah, I was kind of, playing on tour, enjoying, been to Australia many times and toured around there, which is exciting. And yeah, really had a good time, but had, some injuries that had kept me out of the game for a while. Had some wrist and elbow injuries, and I'd been out for a few years by the time I, kind of started to decide if I wanted to continue on or try something new, and actually got an opportunity out in Florida at a early stage sports tech focused venture firm out there. And, venture was something that interested me from a really young age, being, a Silicon Valley native here in the Bay Area, and growing up here was something that was, constantly kind of buzzing around me, always, interesting. And so knew, I guess, the general tech side of venture and didn't know that there were more, I guess, niche focus areas like sports, which was so
Mm.
exciting for me to learn about. And especially with my background coming from professional sports. And so joined that early stage sports tech firm, was on their investment team for about 4 years. And then in 2023, kind of one got the itch to build something on my own as a professional athlete. I'm sure that kind of
Authentic.
entrepreneurial sense, yeah, was budding through. But also, I wanted to expand upon their investment thesis. I wanted to invest in sports adjacent industries like health and into wellness. Yeah, decided to leave that firm and start Cartan in, I think it was the fall of 2023. And now we're on our second fund, but that's kind of the career journey.
Goodness. Were you still playing tennis when you were in the first investment company that you were in? Like, were you still playing professional tennis at that point? Like, was there a cutoff from professional tennis into VC, or were you at one point doing both, and then you were like, no, I'm not. I'm going to retire from tennis, if you like, and
I
focus.
was, yeah, I was still training a little bit by the time I started working for that firm, and I was kind of giving it one last shot after a surgery that I had on my elbow, and kind of knowing in the back of my mind that it probably was, not going to work out, and so trained a little bit. There was a little bit of overlap, but not a ton.
Mm. And so for you, what was that like? What was the identity change for you like in terms of going from professional tennis to then professional career? And like, did you notice anything that needed to change in you, or did you just take everything that you'd learned from tennis and then apply it into investing in VC space? Was there any nuances there?
Yeah, I mean, I was asked this earlier today, like what the identity crisis was, because tennis was something that, I dedicated my entire life to, and, from a really young age. And it was, kind of a big focus of mine for so long. And so when I stopped playing, I didn't have, like, everyone knew me as the tennis player, and knew me as that. And so when I stopped playing, I kind of had to, you know, take a step back, reset, like, not, I wouldn't say like reinvent myself, but have, the kind of a broader view on like what, I'm actually interested in, and kind of like what my life encompasses. And so venture was something that, initially piqued my interest, and, just kept piquing it as I continued on. And I would say, I never had any typical office experience going into my first job at the firm. Of course, had, a wealth of experience, traveling the world, playing pro tennis, managing a team, managing sponsor relations, agent relations, a million things on that end. So got a good, I guess, like, business education from that side. And of course was completing my undergraduate degree online in business. And so that was a nice tie-in. But yeah, I mean, had everything to learn when I started in venture. And it's funny, people talk about like what their 5 to 9 looks like after their 9 to 5. And when I started, especially like I would say the first year or two that I was in venture at that firm, my 5 to 9 after my 9 to 5 was just doing extra research, reading up on everything, to do with venture. And a lot of those like gritty, hardworking character traits kind of flowed over, I would say, from my tennis career, and like just wanting to grasp as much as I could in venture. So yeah, I mean, so many character traits that flowed over from professional sports and just sports in general. I think there's so much you can take from sports into business for sure.
Great. And mastery comes up for me, right? Because you're continuously practicing, and you're continuously training to get to mastery status, if you like, or level. Tell us a little bit about, so you're 2023. So what are we? You're 24, and you decide, I'm going to start my own business. Like, I love this competitive streak in you. VC is not for the faint-hearted. Starting your own business is not for the faint-hearted. You're also a woman, and it's a 24-year-old woman going, I'm gonna now build my own company, and I'm gonna hone in on what I'm really good at and what I know. When it comes to sport, tech, health, all of that, it goes hand in hand with your previous career. Was there any moments there that you were like, "What the hell am I doing?" Or was it just like, tell us, yeah, like for me, like, and were people telling you it's not possible, CC. Like, what are you thinking? Like, were you getting much shut down as a woman who here you were wanting to start your own company?
Yeah, I would say, I had never raised capital before, so that was certainly a skill that, I needed to learn and learned on the fly. And so I didn't necessarily have people say, "Oh, you're not going to be able to do this," but there were definitely moments where I was like, "Gosh, should I have stayed at that firm for a little longer?" And, maybe waited until I was a little bit older to have more of that like experience that maybe people look for. And I had some amazing backers and investors that basically took a bet on me in our first fund. And what's really exciting now is we have fund performance metrics that can back up their initial kind of like bet on me and bet as a person, which is really exciting. But they took a really early bet on me and wanted to bet on anything that I was going to do post tennis and kind of into my career, because they knew that I was extremely successful in one thing. And people that are successful in one thing, there's a good chance that if they move into something else, they're going to be successful again. And so I had a great group of folks that bet on me in that first fund. And yeah, it's been a really exciting ride since then, but a lot of learning experiences along the way.
Yeah, we'll come back to learning in a minute. You tapped in on something there around betting on you from your previous success. What do you think it is? Like, what do you think it is that people see in you? Because you talked around an identity crisis before, right? And I'm starting to think about like crisis is like not the right word when it comes to shifting identity. I think it's more that we're continuously evolving, and when one chapter ends, it's time for the next chapter. And so you take all that was good from your previous chapter, leave behind what wasn't, and then continue to evolve into the new chapter. Success, taking that bet on you and knowing from your past successes, it's a lot of pressure on you as well, though, right? Like in terms of like, when as a professional tennis player, going out onto the court and who you're up against and the expectations of everyone externally, and as well as the expectations you're putting on yourself. Did you feel that, like, that expectation of, oh my goodness, like, that it comes to performance and I guess the learning piece as well. Was that something that felt like a lot of pressure on you because people were taking a bet from your previous success? You had a lot to prove. Yeah.
For sure, yeah, and that's, what I was signing up for, and I knew that that was gonna come with the territory, and that's exactly what I wanted. And I wanted to, be able to prove that I could be successful in a field once I, moved on, from one that I was, previously successful in. And so, yeah, definitely, pressure, but that's every single fund manager deals with that. And maybe more so me putting pressure on myself because I wanted to, prove that I could be successful again in another industry. And so I think it was maybe more so on myself, but, any fund manager, any, person that's managing someone else's capital or even someone else's, whether it's time or managing anything of someone else's, you're going to feel that pressure because there's an external stakeholder
Mhm.
and you want to perform for them. So I would say, maybe just slightly more than the average fund manager.
Yeah, totally. And what have it been your biggest learnings throughout the starting your own company?
Yeah. I mean, I would say just so many learnings from actually starting a business. Everyone's always like, "Oh, what's like one thing you wish you would have known before starting a fund?" And I would say like the time commitment on the administrative side of things when you actually start something is crazy. Whether it's like legal, accounting, like back end stuff, which is something that you don't necessarily think about. You think, oh, they're just investing and that's it, but there's so much extra time that goes into it. And I figured going in it would be a big, obviously, time commitment. That's what I was expecting, but it's never as crazy as it ends up being. And so yeah, I would say just all the little pieces that make up a fund and a firm is, all those pieces are way more than, what you would typically think coming into starting something. So there's, something comes up every day where I'm like, "Oh, I've got to do this to, for this reason," or, whatnot. I would say it's definitely a constant learning experience and best practices and everything like that. But it's definitely, I would say the biggest learning was just understanding like all the administrative stuff that goes into running a fund, running a firm.
Yeah, and you can't cut corners, right? Like, it's like training, like, you must be like, do you feel like this is the hardest you've ever trained? Like, even from your professional tennis career? Like, do you think you're training harder than ever in terms of the last 3 years if you compare, when you were a professional tennis player? And I shouldn't say compare. It's another form of training though, isn't it? Like, it's another form of commitment. You need to, like, it's like anyone who wants to improve, get better at what they're doing. You can't just sit there and expect it to happen for you. You
For
have to
sure.
be focused. You have to have, your routine, all of that. And even on those really hard days when you feel exhausted,
Yeah,
it's showing
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I would say it's just like a different, time commitment, right? For tennis it was around training, recovering, fueling, everything like that. And for my firm it's a greater time commitment in terms of like hours of the day for sure. So yeah, I would say it's absolutely comparable in terms of like, the time commitment for sure.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about you invest in sports and health technology and, companies focused on improving how people move, recover, perform, and live healthier lives. It's a big part of who you are, your identity as a person. What are the sort of companies that you are investing in, and what are they doing? Like, are you in really new age, like, obviously from a tech perspective, what are you seeing at the moment?
Yeah, so on the sports side, we really look at anything that could impact sports. Think, fan engagement solutions or data and analytics. We'll look at, athlete performance or, what the next generation of sports streaming or viewership looks like. And actually on that side of things, I'm also on the board of the USTA, which is our national tennis governing body, and their venture arm. So we do a lot of kind of co-investment with them, which is exciting. And on the health side, I'd say the only areas that we stay away from are biotech and pharma, for a variety of reasons, but we stay kind of more on the side of, wellness, fitness, nutrition, longevity, recovery, preventative health, healthcare, digital health are kind of some areas that we look at. And just from hearing that, I'm sure you can imagine there's a lot of crossover between sports and health, and that's kind of where we like to classify some things as performance. So there is a ton of crossover, but those are typically areas that we're investing in.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit, like, performance and recovery, right? Like, I think about, I always talk to myself at times, even from as a, when you're a professional, you have your off season and your obviously performance season, and recovery is so important. And even when you're performing, that recovery piece is so important. Where I'm going with this is, excuse me, in business as a founder, yourself as a founder of Cartan Capital, as well as the companies and the founders that you're working with, you can work 24/7 and you can forget to have the time out. Like, you can be performing constantly and then you can quite literally crash and burn. It's almost like having a really deep or serious injury that forces you. You didn't plan it, it just happens that way. How do you manage that? And how do you, like, from everything you've learned from professional tennis, because performance, you seem like you've been at the highest of performance, and so performance is like constantly on. How do you do it? And what advice do you give the companies that you invest in and the founders from a
Yeah,
recovery perspective?
it's always a struggle. I would say managing time has been a struggle and something that I try to learn how to do better on a daily, weekly basis, especially since I started Carton. And I always say there's literally 24 hours a day that I could be doing work. Like I
Yeah.
could be working, you know, every minute of every hour and have something to do. Like I would always have something to do, but it's about prioritizing, what's the most important for that day and making sure that I do, you know, also prioritize health, wellness, recovery so that I am performing at my best when I am dedicating time. And so, I mean, our founders are rock stars, and they definitely don't need advice from me on that. But that's kind of how I think about it myself. I need to make sure that in the time that I do recover, I'm refueling and recharging so that I can perform at my best when I am at work.
Yeah, it can be hard though sometimes for me. Like, I don't know about you. It's just like you say, you could be working 24/7. Like, you could feel every moment of every waking day. part of me feels like that's also from a psychology perspective, like it's mindset, it's that like constant bettering yourself, the competition that you're having with yourself. Like, do you ever find that you're competing with yourself internally? Like, that you're having this constant, like, no, just keep going, just do better, just do better. Like, does that happen for you? And I guess the second question is, as a woman in VC, the stats are astounding. Like as the more I'm delving into it, I'm like, wow, like we really need to kind of up the ante here. And, I speak to a lot of men in VC as well, and even Paul Rubens, and, really big supporters of women. And yet there's just such a gap. Does that make you feel like you have more to prove and that it makes you even more competitive than ever? Do you feel that?
I think, yeah, to your first question, definitely always like an internal battle for sure with myself and where I should be spending my time. Absolutely. And to your second, I would say yes, it does. It just gives me even more motivation and it makes me want to work with the women that are in VC even closer and support them as much as I can and work together and collaborate. So I'd say it's definitely less and less. And I would say what I've found in this space is the turnover rates that we're seeing for women in VC are at kind of entry level roles, at like analyst associate roles, not necessarily like partner roles. And so that is, you know, not a great sign, I would say, for future in VC and having, women as leaders in VC for the future if we're not getting them in those early roles, when they're out of school. And that's where the turnover is happening is those early roles. So that's the kind of
Yeah, CC, why is that? Like, why is that happening? And how do you combat that? Like, how do you fix that?
I would say, at big firms, it's probably, really difficult schedules, and it's, probably a stepstone to maybe working for a startup or meeting, networking and working for someone else, and they're maybe not thinking about it as like a long-term position. But at smaller firms, I don't know. I think, it's been really interesting to see that. I've only kind of noticed that dynamic, I'd say, in the last year or two. But it's definitely something that we need to change and try and make more friendly for females. We actually we partner with an organization called Girls into VC, and it's basically a cohort of university students that want to get into VC, and we partner with them for internship opportunities and networking opportunities. So definitely trying to support that as much as we can.
And do you have yeah, it's really good that you've got the girls into VC because I think it's just, again, it's just that education piece and then, you know, I guess grooming them from a younger age. Grooming's the wrong word, you know what I mean though, but getting them ready to be leaders of the future because there's an opportunity for the male and the female energy. And I think when you've got the two going hand in hand, anything is quite possible, right? I think it's really important. What about with what about with the companies that you invest in? Like from on a ratio of like founders, are you seeing more male founders or is it a mix of both?
Yeah, I would say just, historically in venture, it's obviously super male dominated from a startup founder perspective. But we are seeing more female founders come about. We have a few in our portfolio, which is super exciting. And historically in venture, female startup founders have been the most efficient with capital. They've been historically really successful. And just speaking from experience, our female founders in our portfolio have been the most successful in our portfolio as well. So it's really exciting to see that, and I think just continuing that success will gather more interest into maybe girls wanting to start companies and going that route as well. So it's super
Yeah,
exciting.
it's here in Australia as well. There's not as many female entrepreneurs, which, and women starting their own companies. And I think it comes back to confidence, self-worth. Is this possible? Can I do it? Like, have you ever had those self-doubt moments, or or are you just like someone that just pushes through the self-doubt and can I do this? Am I good enough? Do you like, for women? Because I find at times I'll have moments where I'm like, I doubt myself, or I'm like, can I do this? Or, like you're sitting in your own head and it's kind of like, get out of your own head. And that's when I go and, do exercise or whatever to get the endorphins flowing.
Yeah, for sure. I think everyone has those moments, absolutely. And, you gotta push through and gotta keep, fighting for whatever you're working on, whatever, you're doing. I think it's and understanding that everybody has those moments, I think is super important, and that you're not like an outlier for having those feelings. I think that's, something that I'd love to see, more female founders, continuing, even if it's, tough moments in business, or, maybe they hit a hurdle that they didn't expect, just continuing to fight and continuing to, push forward, is, definitely something that I try and do. So
Yeah, it's like a bit like tennis, isn't it? Like the match point and, like the continuously playing or continuously putting one step in front of the other. I've got a couple of final questions for you. Firstly, intuition. I'm keen to understand from you, how much do you think intuition versus like data and like an analytical part of who we are? How much does intuition come into play in what you're doing now? Like, or is it more like being more analytical, more understanding the data? What is it for you?
I think obviously like your first reaction is intuition, and that's really important, especially when we're dealing with startup founders and real, people that are building these companies. That's a huge kind of initial litmus test, but it has to be paired with more analytical consideration and thinking. And so I'd say most of the time your intuitions are correct, and if we, maybe don't get a good vibe, or have a good feeling after our first call, but we decide to dive deeper, a lot of times there's something a little fishy there. And so I'd say, we definitely trust our intuitions, and I trust my intuitions a ton with what I'm
Me
doing now.
too. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's really interesting. I had a conversation with someone last week and they were talking to me about intuition isn't your first thing that you should focus on, and it should be focusing on the analytical part of your brain and then coming back into intuition. And I'm like, I don't know, like as a female, it's like part of who we are. You just know. And then when you go against it, you always know that oh, I wish I had to listen to what my intuition was telling me. Second last question, age. You're 27. Do you come across, like again, even with the company, you said all your founders that you invest in, they're rock stars. I'm sure the people in your team, there's varying ages. Like, is there any, do you ever face any age bias as a 27-year-old woman taking on, the VC ecosystem, as we know it? Do you ever find that?
For sure. And, our performance can, you know, basically speak for itself now. And I think just continuing to keep our heads down and working and performing is the only way that we can combat that.
Mm. Yeah, so good. And then last but not least, performance. Like I said, like you are just at the top, like you're beyond. Like performance is like peak performance, high performance, extra performance. When do you actually let yourself not be in performance and basically sitting in presence and just like, it's not even recovery, right? It's just like that moment of just releasing the valve almost, like, because when, as a professional tennis player, competition, like you're playing at the, the height of competition. I'm not even saying that properly. You know what I'm saying here? And
Yeah, for
I
sure.
can, I get that feeling, like even just in business, you're just like, do you, like, when do you let yourself just be present and sit still in
Yeah.
downtime
Oh my
almost?
gosh. Yeah, for sure. I would say like spending time with family, like family dinners are really important to my husband and I, and we're near my parents, so being able to, spend time with them and just relax, at the end of the day, I think family dinners are important to us. And yeah, relaxing with family, hopefully getting some time on weekends to, recharge a little bit and unplug. I think anytime unplugged is really big, and I'm going on a journey to, like, figure out times of the day where I can, like, really unplug, and figure out, like, a better schedule of that, because otherwise I'd be on my laptop working 24/7. So figuring out a better schedule of, like, unplugging is something on my radar.
Yeah, it's very cool. I mean, it's a bit of an addiction, isn't it? And I think that I've got it in terms of like unplugging, and puppies help a lot. Your little golden retriever you talked about it, my Marley Bob, he unplugs me a lot and lets me know when it's like get off the laptop sort of thing. Schedule-wise, I think for me, yeah, it's a good exploration, and it's a good one to do because, like, finding those energy leaks as well as, the times when you're at your best, also the times when you need to rest, it's super important. Finally, what is next for Cartan Capital?
Yeah, we're backing as many amazing founders as we can through this fund for the next few years, and then for more funds in the future. But yeah, just excited to continue investing in companies in this space and supporting innovation throughout the areas that we're investing in.
Amazing, CC. And do you have any final words of wisdom, advice for, I'm going to call out the young women out there, whether they're starting in they're really good at a sport and they want to keep pursuing it and get to, professional level, or they're starting out in their career and, they have big goals like yourself. What would be do you have any words of wisdom or piece of advice that you would give them?
Yeah, I would say like some of the best advice I've gotten, throughout both my tennis career and business has, been around confidence and how important confidence is. And, portraying that you're confident is, such a valuable tool to have. Whether in business, it's in, meetings or, with colleagues or, around people that you want to work with or whatnot. I think confidence can go a long way, and especially in sport as well. And, when you're not confident, you can act confident until you feel confident for sure.
Yeah, I like that. You can act confident till you feel confident, and on in the inside, you may not be feeling completely confident, and on the outside, just go out there and just be yourself. And I think the more you practice being confident, the more confident you become, and just putting yourself out there, like what you're saying, is just like venture into the unknown. Take the courage, be brave enough to just put yourself out there, I think is what you're saying here. And to all the listeners, and especially all the women and men, I won't break it in half. I think it's super important right now. There's endless possibilities. If you have an idea, or if there's something you want to pursue, just give it a go.
For sure.
Now is the time. CC, how do we find out more about Cartan Capital? How do we find out more about you?
Yeah, we've got LinkedIn pages for myself, for Carton. That's probably the best way to follow what we're doing, for sure.
Yeah, and on Insta, and I noticed you're on Instagram as well. So I'll share that with everyone as well. Cece, thank you so much for your time. Incredible career today. 27. Wow. Imagine what you're going to be like when you hit my age. You'll be like, watch out, world, is all I'll say. So thank you so much for your time, and have a wonderful week ahead.
Awesome. You too. Thanks, B.
Thank you.